All right, here we go. Chapter 1 of The Sovereign Child. I'm recording these live. No edits, just to, get some authentic treatment of the material out there. And so started off with Chapter 4, the 4 categories of harm that compulsory rules cause, and then went through the preface. And now, Chapter 1, I started this thing off with food, jumping into maybe the most controversial element of parenting, and something that raises a lot of concerns in terms of enforcing rules and achieving certain outcomes. So I'm just going to start reading. Chapter 1, Eating What They Want. Eating may be the most personal human experience. Its closest rival, breathing, lacks the richness and variety of all the many foods and ways to eat, enjoy, and experience them. Eating is a primal exercise of sovereignty. To control your own eating entails governing both your body and what goes into it. But it's also a vulnerability, since things that go inside you pose an incredible risk. All right, so the most personal human experience. That's why I started the book with this, because it just gets right at the heart of the issue with, I would say, minimum distractions. It's hard to pick another activity. I would say breathing is more personal, more immediate, but there's minimal control over somebody else's breathing. So that's not really a parenting issue. Sleep is a close rival, but it doesn't have all of the richness that eating has. So I thought eating was a good place to start. And by most human, I guess it's, I'll keep reading. Eating is constrained by and intertwined with the laws of chemistry and biology, but it is also profoundly subjective and nuanced. Tastes and eating preferences don't just mechanically develop the way a child's body does. They are cultivated and refined. They are bound up with almost every other aspect of life. And this is, there's just, I get in a lot of jousting back and forth on X about nutrition and health and eating. And I think what gets a fundamental misconception or a fundamental confusion about eating, and this is kind of secondarily related to parenting, but it's certainly related to sovereignty and autonomy. People have a lot to say about what other people eat, the virtues, the vices. It's one thing to promote a certain kind of diet, to say that this diet really works well for me. I really enjoy eating in this kind of way. It's something completely different to say that somebody else has something wrong with them according to or based on what they eat. But that is a pervasive, almost accepted form of commentary, that it's okay to trash how somebody else eats. What a terrible state of affairs. It's an insult to give somebody a hard time about what they do with their daily life, and how they choose to eat is what they choose to do with their daily life. And I think, again, the central confusion here is that eating is treated like it's this mechanical process of sustaining the human body, and it's simply a question of what you put in your mouth and how that turns out in terms of your health, in terms of your weight, your muscle strength, your cognitive potential, your moods, your emotions. But that is such a simplistic, it's an obviously simplistic view of things. And I almost wish I spent more time attacking that simplistic view, although that kind of takes us away from the issues of parenting. But just think about it for a second. Think of all the different ways that people eat, right? All the different contexts, what they eat for, right? There are religious reasons to eat. There are celebrations. There is, going out to brunch with your friends is completely different from eating on the way to work or eating after a workout, or, the list of ways to eat would go on forever. There is cuisine is as big a topic as it gets. There really is. There are not. So all the different cultures, all the different food types, and in this day and age, when so much of that is available at any given time, to issue certain rules about good and bad ways of eating is just, it's nonsensical. Yes. So, and I get to that in the book, but it's also something that humans must do every day, multiple times a day. And so eating is not just a way of sustaining yourself, it's a way of organizing your day, right? Some people organize their day around food, other people organize food around their day. But I mean, you have to account for lunch, right? Anything you think of during the day, you have to account for what are we going to do for food? So it touches on everything else in life. It's not just about the food, even though the food itself is already enough. It's also how eating interacts with your job, interacts with your romantic partner, interacts with your friends, your family. I mean, so it's a mistake. And again, it points to a fundamental mistake that we make all the time, which is assume that some people know what is best for others. Some people know what is best for others to eat. That is absurd. That's absolutely absurd. All right. And so it's especially absurd for kids. Kids are not a kind of carve out here. It's not like, well, it doesn't make sense to give adults a hard time about what they eat or try to control what adults eat, but it does make sense to try to control what kids eat. And I would say that's opposite. It's even more nonsensical to try to control what kids eat, because kids are learning, and this goes for everything in the book, kids are always doing two things at once. Adults are generally doing one thing. Kids are doing two things. Adults are learning about the world and trying to figure out, how to solve the problems they're encountering during their day. Kids are doing that also. And in addition to that, they're learning that they are autonomous, self-sovereign agents who are navigating the world, right? So adults are eating according to their preferences. Again, not just for food, not just for tastes, but their preferences for body image, their preferences for, mess, hassle, religious devotion, spiritual devotion, et cetera, et cetera. Adults are not only working within those preferences and priorities. Adults are only doing that. Kids are doing that as well, and they are creating their preferences. They are creating a sense of, caring about, let's say, the spiritual dimension of food, or caring about the health dimension of food, or caring about the efficiency of fitting food into a busy workday, or caring about the relationship with food and other people, or appearance, or et cetera, et cetera. So kids are creating a structure of preferences and kind of organizing those preferences themselves, where adults have already charted this ground. They already kind of have a tree of preferences. They may be refining them, still moving them around, but the idea that one is developing their own tastes, adults know that. Like, we are in charge of our own tastes. Kids are discovering the idea that you can have your own tastes, right? Like with music, at some point kids realize that, oh wow, I kind of have this an identity as a music lover and as a particular type of music lover. Adults often take it for granted, or have already gone through that process of, finding themselves as having a certain identity with relationship to music. Anyway, so it's even worse to try to control kids' relationship with food, because they are in the process of finding out that they have a relationship with food, right? They're creating it in the moment, and to step in and say, actually, no, you can't handle this one. This one's too tricky for you. You are too vulnerable to temptation and to all sorts of missteps, that you can't be trusted around food, and I have to take control of it for you. That is a terrible message to send to somebody early in life. All right, I'll get to all that. Okay, imagine a good friend is visiting from out of town. You are tempted to stay up late. Oops, sorry. Uh, that was sleep. For children, eating is like walking and talking. Kids will figure it out on their own without any quote unquote help from the outside. To be sure, parents are obligated to provide food for kids since they're incapable of acquiring it on their own, but the duty to provide food does not imply the right, let alone the injunction, to control food. That's huge. We hear that argument all the time. Just because just because when guests come to visit, you're obligated to feed them. Not as much as you're obligated to feed your own kids, of course, but it would still be wrong to say since I'm obligated to feed you, you're going to eat what in this house you eat what we serve. That's it's not a dignified way to treat somebody. Oh yeah, good. Phew. I use that example. We provide food for house guests, but we don't try to control them with it, right? Like, who would want to visit somebody who is forcing you to eat this or that because they know it's good for you? But of course, when we have house guests, we often will provide food that we like, that we think they would like. That's completely valid. But we also take into consideration the foods that they like to eat, and we often provide those as well. So it's a reasonable, I wouldn't even say a give and take. It's a, what is it? I don't know. I think it's a good example. The way we treat house guests around food, and in general, house guests are a good analogy for treating kids. Kids are essentially house guests who we forced to come visit us, right? Kids didn't elect to come visit. They were forced into our homes by us. So we even have less standing to control what they eat than we would about house guests, because house guests can always leave. Okay, controlling children's access to food is the norm today. A good parent does not let their kid eat whatever they want. There are various rationales, but the general argument is that eating is only about nutrition and desire, and since kids don't understand anything about nutrition, and they don't understand the dangers of their own desires, parents need to manage these for them. Parents don't just control their children's food, they control them with food. Since sweets are generally restricted, they become a default reward for any desired behavior, and their restriction becomes a punishment for any undesired behavior, right? Like, ouch. That's confusing, right? Sweets are not about being a good boy or good girl. Sweets are about tasting good, and not just tasting good because they don't always taste good, right? The first piece of cake tastes different than the fifth piece of cake. The first lollipop tastes different than the fifth lollipop. A lollipop in the morning tastes different than a lollipop at night or in the afternoon, etc. Right? Again, all of these different preferences. People eat all sorts of weird, what I consider disgusting stuff, right? But other people love it. Certain flavors and tastes and textures at certain times of the day, in certain contexts, it's a very rich, complex thing. But if you try to control somebody with food, you connect foods with other stuff rather than the context that a kid would encounter it. So sweets become about being good or bad. What a disaster. How many adults have problems with food, problems with sweets related to their own self-worth and virtue and goodness and badness? I think that's a disaster. Should parents really just let their kids... Taking children seriously means not mediating their relationship with food. A parent simply cannot know how a child should eat because they cannot know their hunger patterns and cravings or how different foods taste and feel to them. I don't know. Parents cannot know how kids should eat. One person cannot know how another person should eat. There's just no way. It's hard enough to know ourselves what we should eat. It's hard to plan our own meals. I found this hard. It's hard to go shopping. I mean, how many times have I gone shopping and bought certain stuff and then taken home and feel like, I just don't feel like cooking that. I don't feel like eating that. Or I'll think that a certain dish is the best and I'll buy enough to make, 10 times as much. And then after the second go round, I'm sick of this and I already want some variety. We cannot know ourselves. We sure as hell cannot know somebody else. We don't know what things taste like and what their own desires are. Should parents really just let their kids eat whatever they want? The short answer is yes. And so that was the idea here, is to really bite the bullet, to admit that I'm serious when that I don't think that parenting is about drawing the line. It's simply ignoring the line altogether. We're not drawing the line around foods. We're not saying you can eat whatever you want except with these few rules. I'm saying dispensing with this altogether. It's not to say that I'm neglecting my kids and not paying attention to how they eat at all. I'm just not inserting myself as someone who allows or disallows this or that. Kids should have a wide range of foods to explore and learn about with no restrictions, limited only by what their parents are capable of providing. Outside of well-known poisons or even borderline substances like alcohol, anything that adults eat should be on offer for kids. The reasons kids should have free rein with regard to food is that they are building an understanding of how to eat in the same way that they are building an understanding of everything else in life, by exploration, discovery, and trial and error. They are figuring out food, and this is one of the most important things for somebody to figure out. Food and sleep are pretty much walking, talking, food, sleep, breathing, how to use the bathroom, right? These are the kind of essential basics, and they're so fundamental that kids encounter them before they develop much language skill at all. The ability to understand what a parent is telling them about food at the age of 1, 2, 3, 4 is almost non-existent. Having a conversation with a kid about food is like having a conversation with them about walking. A 1-year-old, right? Learning to walk. If you got involved with the 1-year-old learning how to walk, you'd probably screw it up. You're unlikely to be helpful, especially if you're telling the person, especially if you're giving them rewards and punishments according to how they're walking. So that's why I think, again, food is so fundamental. It is on. The reason why getting involved is wrong, or obviously wrong, for when something is fundamental, is that it is directly mediated between the kid and the food, and there's almost no way to get involved that doesn't confuse things. I guess I'm repeating myself a bit. And then how do kids learn about this? This is really the theme of the book. They learn about this the way they learn about everything else. Exploration and discovery through trial and error. How do you learn that you don't overeat lollipops? You eat a lot of lollipops and you feel like hell, and you're like, ugh, it doesn't feel good to eat 10 lollipops in a row. That's the best way to know what happens if you eat 10 lollipops, right? You could explain that to a kid 1,000 times, and they're not going to get it like they would if they simply overate lollipops. And again, the anecdotes are not proof of this, but I know for my own kids, I've overindulged them in lollipops and all the rest of it, and we go to the grocery store and they pick out candy all the time, and they'll pick out a big bag of something, and then they will eat, not even half of it. They will eat often a small percentage of it, and then it will sit on the counter and get stale, and I'll throw it out because they get a sense of how much is too much. All right. As adults, we have reasons for how and why we eat. Breakfast can be carefully orchestrated to support a workout, or scarfed down in the car so we don't get hungry at work. We can show off our favorite brunch spot or casually order in from home, etc., etc. So I was describing when I said there's all these different reasons and contexts for why adults eat. And we develop these reasons not because somebody controlled us and said, this is how you eat breakfast, this is how you eat lunch. Instead, these patterns of eating emerged with reference to everything else that we're doing. If we are, workaholics, we're going to eat in a certain way, and if we are health nuts, we're going to eat in a certain way. But not everybody's a health nut. Not everybody's a workaholic. Not everybody is. So it's nonsensical for to enforce one particular way of eating. All right. Given the central role food plays in daily life, rules around eating can be particularly damaging. It is common, perhaps even the norm, for otherwise well-adjusted adults, having been raised with food rules, to have guilt, shame, and insecurity about eating. That's the other thing. Like, food rules, it's not like they guarantee success by no means, right? They often backfire or they often fail. In fact, I would say it's more common than not that an adult considers themselves to have a difficult relationship or a problematic relationship with food. It's certainly very common. I don't know if it's the norm, but it's quite common. And so if it's hard for adults to know how to eat, how the heck do they know how kids should eat? And on the other hand, if this is the relationship with food that many adults have as a result of food rules, well, food rules have a terrible track record. And my guess is most of the issues that adults have with food are derived from how they were treated around food as kids. The best argument I've heard for controlling food comes from the fear of kids becoming overweight. Eating may be deeply embedded in biology, but modern food is different. It is carefully designed to be inexpensive and taste good, with lots of sugar and additives to provide quick bursts of calories in place of slower burning, heartier foods that were present in our ancestral environment that our bodies evolved in and for. So, without a parent's watchful eye, kids will eat junk food all day and get fat all too easily. So, I think it's a legitimate concern. It's easier to get overweight on modern food than it was to get overweight on food from the Serengeti, the environment that we evolved within. And being overweight is a problem. I'm not saying that doesn't matter. However, there's more going on than simply eating too much junk food and getting overweight. Number one, you can eat a lot of junk food and not get overweight. It takes a long time between how one eats and whether one becomes overweight. So this is not a one-to-one correlation. This is not like running out in the street with oncoming traffic. That is an urgent, unambiguous risk of grievous bodily harm in the immediate term, with very clear actions that would prevent somebody from getting hit by a car, grabbing the kid and dragging them out of the road. This is not that. You could eat ice cream for quite a while before getting overweight. In fact, you could eat ice cream and never get overweight. You could eat a lot of ice cream and never get overweight. You could eat exclusively ice cream and not get overweight. You could binge on ice cream for a week and have zero ill effects. If the calories that you're taking in from extra ice cream are compensated by calories that you're not taking in from other foods that you're not eating, then we got a net balance here. So it is simply wrong to connect this one-to-one relationship between tasty, high-calorie foods and becoming overweight. And the same goes for all the other health deficits. In the modern world, we almost never see kids with nutritional deficiencies, vitamin deficiencies. That almost never happens, even with very restricted diets, because modern junk food even is fortified with all sorts of things, and now there are theories that this and that nutritional deficiency is not attended to by modern medicine and all that. And I could go down that road quite a while. And I don't want to, because the point of this is, the point here is how to navigate that world. Even if you see the world of food as fraught with all sorts of risks, that still does not warrant control, because control comes with collateral damage, the foul four, right? Control will always come with gatekeeping, with confusion, with issues with one's regard to themselves, self-esteem issues, etc. So, so I'm going to pause there. Junk food. Oh yeah, the reason for controlling food. And then becoming overweight. You know, it is possible that a kid would become overweight given unfettered access to food. And again, lots of kids get overweight with food rules. So food rules don't prevent weight problems. And I would say, and this is one of the more controversial things that I said, even if my kid did get overweight, would I still want to introduce anxiety into my relationship with them about their weight? I mean, if you think of just all the downstream harms that come from that, right? Loss of trust, anxiety around every meal, anxiety in anticipation of every meal. That is just not a way I would want to live. And I think those harms, when compared to the harms of being overweight, are at least on a par with each other. And then there are ways to address being overweight that don't involve control. By the time a kid becomes overweight, being overweight is a solvable problem, is my point. And there are ways to persuade kids that, from their own perspective, that they could lose weight. Again, I'll admit, that's fraught territory. I would not even want to. I'll be very ginger about approaching that, because I would not want them to get the impression that I need to be in control of what they eat. I don't want them to be self-conscious around me with food. I want them to enjoy their time with me in the presence of food, or enjoy their food in my presence. Just eating with other people is, again, it's recurring. It is a essential feature of life, and I would hate for that to be colored by anxiety around weight and other things. Okay. So then I addressed this concern. So what about the concern that that modern food is different from our primordial food? First, like every other understandable concern, identifying the problem is not the same as identifying the solution. Food rules often backfire, as I said. Rules might produce the exact eating compulsions and disorders that they are intended to prevent. As with rules around drugs and other dangerous substances, no strategy around food can guarantee that a kid won't become overweight, right? Rules are not a magic wand that are guaranteed to succeed. On the contrary, some strategies, in particular those that entail rule enforcement, are guaranteed to cause suffering, confusion, and or psychological damage. Second, since weight gain is an unavoidable risk of modern life, the safest approach is for the child to develop a robust understanding of all aspects of food, cultural, biological, and personal, by engaging directly with the problem situation. An experience that is mediated by someone else prevents such discovery. So, right, like this is a common thing, is that kids go off to college and become overweight because they're suddenly set free into the world of food, and they don't know how to navigate it because they were never trusted to do that on their own at home. And so, they're going to be unleashed into this world of abundance, and using tools like punishment and reward and fear are not great. They don't serve kids well to navigate this world on their own, because they don't produce understanding. Whereas giving the kid freedom to engage with food allows them to understand how these foods taste, how these foods make them feel, what these foods do to their weight, their appearance, their energy levels, etc. That is I would say, the best way to prepare them for the eventual state where they will be free with food, is to build up their understanding without confusion inserted by nannies. Consider not being overweight because your parents forbid you from overeating is worlds apart from understanding your own desires and cravings and tailoring them to suit your other preferences for how to live your life, including body size and appearance. Some people really care about this stuff, some people really don't. Some people much prefer eating tasty food and don't really care what they look like, and vice versa. A crucial guard against risk is to have a trusted and knowledgeable person available for questions. This lifeline can only work if this person has the child's best interests at heart, and only if the child believes this. So lots of parents have their children's best interests at heart, but the kids don't believe that because all they see is a gatekeeper. And what you really want is the kid to see you as someone who has their best interests at heart. And ideally, all judgment, expectations, and moralizing are absent. Judgment, expectations, and moralizing degrade trust. And trust is a lifeline, a safety lifeline. If a kid finds themselves struggling with food issues, a parent should be there to help by offering knowledge, guidance, and any other kind of support they might need. Fear of punishment, shame, or even more rules only push the kid to find potentially dangerous workarounds, like eating disorders, or to cope with their issues via psychological torment, like hiding food. And then third, a robust understanding, so these are the 3 reasons why this argument about modern food being uniquely dangerous. Third, a robust understanding is not only critical to safety, but also to living well. With respect to food, this means eating in a way that supports other interests and preferences, including one's own conception of health, relationships, ambitions, and avocations. I know foodies who will travel internationally just to eat exotic dishes, and I know people who consume mostly meal replacement drinks in a bottle so they can minimize the time spent preparing and consuming food. Right? There are that one issue, right? The foodies I know would just be horrified at a meal replacement drink, and the life efficiency people would be horrified at taking a vacation just to go eat somewhere. And neither of them is right or wrong, and neither of them should be controlling the other ones. Each person develops a very unique, very robust, very intricate, very nuanced, very subtle set of preferences about life, and food is embedded with them, and food cannot be selected and held to some independent standard, some standard independent of all the other things. And that is the theme of the whole book. Life is about a constantly shifting set of interests and preferences that one creates oneself, one is sovereign over that process, and one needs to be allowed the freedom to construct that tree of preferences in order to, I would say, live well. About the foodie and the efficiency meal replacement eater, each of these lifestyles suits their particular, each of these ways of eating suits their particular lifestyles, which they've developed over years of exploring the world. And that exploration begins in childhood. Yes. All the preferences that you have, all the stuff that you think is important as an adult, has its roots in childhood. You are forming all of that stuff. It starts with day one. So you want to let the person form it. I mean, that's what a life is. A life is figuring out what to do with your day. And it's backwards to say that you can't figure that out until you're 21, until you're 18. Because the process has already begun. And if you're in there trying to control that process in the beginning, you are mucking up this person's preferences, and you're screwing with their preference tree that they will inherit. They will be using in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, all the way up to their old age. Okay. No one would be well served by someone forcefully intervening and telling them the right way to eat, whether now or back when they were children. The would-be intervener might be able to guess what a child's tastes and preferences are in the moment, but they definitely can't know how those tastes and preferences will evolve with time. If a parent forces their own preferences into this process, these preferences will clash in some way with the child's developing desires, cravings, needs, and interests. There's nothing wrong with exposing a child to your preferences, quite the opposite. The key is allowing them to reject your preferences. If they aren't allowed to opt out, then your preference necessarily disrupts their understanding of the world, and that just goes for everything. If they can't opt out, it's great to show them what you think is important, but if they can't say, nah, I wanted to go this way instead, and you force the issue anyway, you are disrupting their natural construction of their own preferences. If vegetables are unwanted, what is that noise? If vegetables are unwanted, then being forced to eat them would cause resentment toward the person doing the forcing. Vegetables wouldn't be about their taste and texture and how they make the kid feel, they wouldn't only be about taste and texture and how they make the kid feel, but they'd also be about the person who forced it and guesses about that person's expectations and anxieties. Forcing always introduces confusion, extra layers of problems to solve, or both. Hardly a recipe for learning about food or anything else. I like the use of the word recipe there. All right, so this is anticipating a lot of the Final Four. I'll just finish this last part. What would I do about my kid's weight? First of all, I'd wait until it appears as a problem before addressing it. And that really is a huge part of this. So much forcing happens with kids to avoid problems that would have never surfaced in the first place. Right? If a kid isn't getting overweight, if a kid isn't malnourished or have some deficiency, if the pediatrician isn't worried about them, then what's the value of forcing something? Why not wait until something appears before doing something about it? That is one of the simplest hacks in this whole book. Most of the time, there is time to wait, right? If a kid runs out on the street, you don't have time to wait and see if they get hit by a car, right? But that's different from becoming overweight. There's almost always time. Teeth brushing, there's time to figure out what to do about the teeth. There's time to figure out what to do about food, sleep, etc. Eating a second ice cream cone won't immediately make a kid overweight. Neither will a third or even a fourth. In fact, it might make the kid sick to their stomach and teach them about satiety far better than a parent's speech ever could. Put differently, overeating might provide its own signal for why not to overeat. By waiting for obesity to present itself, related discoveries about overeating are made available that would otherwise be blocked off by food rules. Exactly. So the feeling of discomfort at overeating ice cream or overeating lollipops, the kid may never experience that because they've always been cut off before they reach that. So they never got that strong intuitive signal about why eating in certain ways is not a good idea because the parent never even allowed it to happen in the first place. So rules are always stunting. They are always confusing. They are always limiting. They always cut down the range of knowledge and growth and progress. All right. I want to read that last sentence again because it's so good, I think. By waiting for obesity to present itself, related discoveries about overeating, like the discomfort of being, of satiety, of being sated. By waiting for obesity to present itself, related discoveries about overeating are made available that would otherwise be blocked off by food rules. All right, we'll do more about food in the next video. Thanks for watching.